Welcome back to Protea Conversations, where we sit down with operators, builders, and thinkers who are actually solving real-life problems inside a business, not just talking about them. Today's guest is someone who sits right at the intersection of data, operations, and real-world execution. East is the founder of Kestrel RMS, a platform built to solve a problem most operators know all too well. Fragmented systems, disconnected data, and no clear view of what's really happening across a business. What makes this conversation different is that Cash didn't start by building software. He started by solving his own problem as an operator managing a real estate portfolio. And in doing so, he built something that goes beyond reporting. It's about control, visibility, and actually making better decisions with data you already have. In this episode, we're going to get into where traditional accounting falls short, why so many businesses still struggle to connect financial and operational data, and the most expensive blind spot that operators don't even realize they have. We're going to learn a ton from Cash about life, taking risks, and using data to make decisions. Cash, welcome to Protea Conversations.
Zane, thank you for having me. Excited to get into this today.
I have to start with a name because it feels like it's fake, but my understanding that it's not. So tell me about it.
It is not. So it's a family name. It's short for Cashin. When I was growing up, there were a bunch of Cashins in my family. I didn't even know it was an unusual name until I got to elementary school, and realized that there weren't a bunch of people named Cash in the world, at least not at the time. You see it a little bit more these days. It puts a lot of pressure on me to remember everybody else's name because everyone remembers mine.
It's definitely an easier one. Historical background roots, Cashin family traces the early history of Munster and Ireland, where they're chief of a word that I can't pronounce. But seems like Gaelic royalty, basically.
Yeah, that's how we generally like to describe and think of ourselves, Gaelic royalty. We've done a little bit of family history, and my uncle is always fond of saying we're really just purebred American mutts around here. We've been in the U.S. for a long time and been in South Arkansas for a long time, so some connection to the lineage, but yeah, I'd say our ancestry pretty much starts and stops in Arkansas in terms of the family.
That's fair enough. It's like my family history. We try to look back to it. It's like, I don't know, you guys just appeared at some point in South Africa. Nobody really knows where you're from, but welcome.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here today.
But obviously going by the short, Cash.
Yes.
Just sort of fell into it, being that all the time.
Yeah. So my parents started calling me Cash when I was a kid, and it just stuck. And yeah, like I said, it was I didn't realize that it was an unusual name until I was a little bit older, because we've got a lot of Cash and Cashins in the family. I've passed it down to my daughter. It's her middle name. She doesn't go by it, but so we kept the tradition going.
Yeah, really awesome. A little bit of feels like it forced you into your career path, though, by going by the name Cash.
Yeah, I resisted for a very long time and somehow ended up back in the finance and accounting world. Not something I started off thinking I was going to be gravitating towards, but certainly where I'm pretty firmly rooted now.
What was those early dreams? What did you want to do?
So I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad owned a construction company and was involved in a lot of different types of businesses, was a real estate developer. My mom owned a fabric store, still owns a fabric store. So I grew up around all of that, been interested in entrepreneurship and starting businesses from a young age. And, really since I was a young adult, started various businesses that, or at least attempted to start various businesses. Grew up in the outdoors, hunting and fishing, camping and hiking. So the first company I tried to start was a fly fishing company, doing a newsletter for fly fishing and hunting, and kind of started and stopped along the way. I was, like I said, very interested in the outdoors and science. So I have an undergraduate degree in biology. Couldn't really see myself in a white coat or going to med school like a lot of my colleagues were doing. Got a biology degree from a liberal arts college, so a little bit different of a path than the traditional science degree. It's a Bachelor of Arts. I went into environmental consulting in the construction world, so doing phase 1 environmental reports and lead testing and asbestos monitoring and things like that. And got really interested in the business side of things. So left there and went to the University of Arkansas. I got a master's in business. And while I was in grad school, had an opportunity to do a work study program at a research center in the College of Business that Walmart and a few other big companies mostly food and ag companies had started. It's called the Applied Sustainability Center. I was the only person with a science background in the small office, so I kind of got thrown into, hey, we've got a research grant with the College of Chemical Engineering, and they need a liaison to help them build these models. So I kind of got thrown into building big supply chain based environmental models when I was in grad school, and turned into a nearly 20-year career working and basically doing environmental accounting at the supply chain level. Every sort of step that I took, I got more and more interested in the technical details. And I'd say it took me, 4 or 5 years to really admit to myself that my heart really was in the technical side of things. And I liked the numbers. I liked building models. I liked balancing things out. That was where I found myself sort of retreating to when I didn't want to do other work. That was my comfort zone, and turned into a career working in sustainability and working in environmental accounting, at least for the first part of my
That is super interesting.
career.
And I want to go back to the sort of fly fishing company. That's interesting. Like,
Sure.
what was the big dream there?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was an excuse early on to just, spend all of our time talking about hunting and fishing. I had a friend, also young, who was tying flies and selling them commercially. So we, it didn't really go anywhere. We had the idea to start a newsletter. So, it was back in the days of we drew it up and went to my dad's office and photocopied it. We weren't allowed to use color. So we were doing black and white photocopies and trying to distribute those. And, didn't really get off the ground. Wasn't anything big, but that's the first one I can remember where we sat down and said, we're gonna start a business, and went out and started doing that. A few years down the road, got a little bit more involved in starting a gear company, trying to do fly fishing gear for kayaks, fishing out of kayaks. It was kind of just a thing that was starting off. Again, didn't really get off the ground. I didn't make it too far. I was a little young, trying to manufacture things, but it's always been a big part of my life, and seemed like a fun thing to do for a living. So we tried a few of those different things as I was growing up.
Fascinating. So I assume you're a big fly fisherman?
I am. Yep. And fly fishing. So I grew up hunting and fishing a lot. Got interested in fly fishing, and it's pretty much taken over all of my outdoor activities. So spend a lot of time on the water. I'm based in Northwest Arkansas, up in the Ozark Mountains. So tons of access to great smallmouth fishing, some great trout fishing, great largemouth bass fishing. So something that's pretty much a year-round pursuit for me now. I love tying flies, love fly fishing, and I try to do it as much as I can, and I do quite a bit of traveling to do it as well. So it's been a really special thing for me in my life.
Outside of your back door, what's your favorite place to go fly fishing?
So we have some property in a little place called Lee Creek. It's a small stream that runs into the Arkansas River. It flows through a national park called Devil's Den. It's a pretty small little watershed, and we've got some creek frontage right there. So that is definitely the place I spend the most amount of time fly fishing and teaching my kids to fly fish, and really anybody who I can find to put a fly rod in their hand. Try to make it a mission to introduce it to as many people as I can. It's about an hour south of me. So I spend as much time as I can, and drag the family down there as much as I can as well. So I'd say that's where I spend the vast majority of my time fly fishing.
Any dream trip for fly fishing, like on the wish list?
Well, the one I've been eyeing the most is Patagonia, going to South America and doing some of the fly fishing down there for trout. And then, of course, I haven't fished much in Europe. Would love to go do some trips over there with some of the more traditional waters. I'm a partner in a company in Maine, so I'm fortunate to get to spend a lot of time up there. And there's sort of just endless exploring in New England up into the eastern coast, east coast of Canada up there, really just kind of throwing a dart on the map, and you can have a dream trip up there. So yeah, those are the two that I try to spend the most time doing.
Incredible. Fishing is beyond me. I had two really bad experiences fishing close together as a young kid, and now my patience is just not there for it. But I'll go hiking for hours and days at end. But
yeah. I really try to not overly force it onto my kids. I try to not make it, this is something that Dad always made me do, but it is one of my deepest hopes that they get really into it, and we can have some trips together, and they can enjoy it like I've gotten a chance to enjoy it.
Well, you're better than me. I force my kids to hike. I'm like, you're doing it. I like it. It's something I want to do. I do a lot of stuff for you, so suck it up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not sure they would agree that I don't force them, but
Yeah.
I could be a lot. I could make them do it a lot more in my mind.
Just the one kid or
No,
more
I've
than
got
one?
two kids. I've got a 10-year-old who's finishing up fifth grade, and then a 7-year-old who's finishing up second grade right now.
I have a 10 and 8-year-old, third and fourth grade, so
There you go. There you go. So
similar points in life with kids, but
absolutely.
sounds like very different worlds where mine are
Yeah.
in gyms and walking up the side of mountains, and yours are fishing in beautiful locations.
Well, we try to get our kids out and travel as much as we can. My wife and I both had the privilege of being able to travel when we were young, and it's definitely something that we try to really impart on our kids. Not only enjoying what we have around us. We're right in the middle of the country. We're pretty far from a lot of major city centers, so we really are purposely trying to travel with our kids a lot, and giving them the same opportunities that we had to see the world when we were young.
Yeah, I actually believe, being able to experience different environments and the people within those environments make a real big difference in people's outlooks on life. And I
Absolutely.
think it's one of the best gifts you can give your children, even though it can be tough. Traveling with kids is never easy.
I think back to my first, when we were always worried about traveling. We do all this planning, and she generally did great. And then we had our second, and it was kind of just like, all right, son, you're just gonna have to, you're along for the ride. We can't stop and start this thing for you now. And they've both been great. Just took our first international trips with them this year, and it's been, yeah, it's been pretty incredible to have kids that are a little bit older that are able to really enjoy some of the travel that we enjoy as adults.
Yeah, no, I'm very fortunate as well. My kids have been pretty easy travelers, and generally, especially the hotel room. I have two boys, so that's probably a little easier than boy girl, and I'm sure that'll get a little harder as they age a bit more. But it's one of my favorite things to do, just to get out to random locations. We actually
Absolutely.
have a trip coming up to Lake Tahoe,
Nice.
so looking forward to that one coming up.
Absolutely.
Any trips to the family planned?
Let's see. The next trip that we have coming, we spend time with my parents every year in South Carolina, at the beach, and then we either fly or road trip up to Maine. After that, so do a little bit of work, and but a lot of sitting around on the beach, a lot of enjoying the water. Hopefully some fishing while we're up there. So we just got back from a spring break trip to Buenos Aires. So we went to Argentina for spring break, and are trying to explore more and more of South America with our kids. So it was a very special experience. Kids really loved being on the plane. They loved getting served a meal on the plane. They thought they got free headphones. They thought it was the neatest thing in the
Yeah.
world. And fortunately or unfortunately, when you ask them the highlights, that is going to be one of the things that they say.
I got to watch as many movies as I like for a bunch of time.
They had an iPad and both screens going, and I don't know that anybody ever actually plugged their headphones into the one that they was playing, but it kept them entertained all night. So fine with me.
It's all about creating memories, right? No matter what they are. Sometimes the ones that we think are the most important is not the ones that will stick with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, certainly my memories from growing up, the fun times are, when we got stuck and had an extra night in the hotel, and, got to go down and eat whatever we wanted out of the breakfast buffet and things like that. And, you travel enough, you're gonna run into situations like that. And I think those are some of my best memories, are when things went wrong and how we adapted as a family. So just count on it, and makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's get back to the professional life a little bit.
Absolutely.
With the biology routes, obviously a little bit of parallels to what your dad was doing, and then get,
Absolutely.
sort of sticking close to the family business. And obviously, as we get through your story a little bit more, we'll
Yep.
see those parallels continue.
Certainly.
But you said you loved the business side.
Mhm.
What was the big attraction?
You know, um, Entrepreneurship was always the goal, and I don't even know that I called it that for a long time. I was always so interested in a lot of different things, or at least that's the nice way to put it. The reality of it is I would get distracted by a lot of shiny different objects. Was doing a lot of traveling, bouncing around to different places. So was always looking for flexibility, always looking to sort of be in control of my own destiny. Um, and being in a position to take advantage of opportunities as they come along. So when I got out of grad school, I ended up going to work full time for the University of Arkansas. as a research associate and working between the College of Business and the College of Engineering and the Chemical Engineering department. Got an opportunity from there to go work for a software company. So it's pretty niche world. It's called Life Cycle Assessment, or LCA, and it's basically environmental cost accounting at the supply chain level. So normally I grab whatever's next to me, a coffee cup, and what we try to do is understand the amount of energy, material, water, emissions that go into a product, into a consumer packaged good. It's very similar to cost accounting, except we're counting megajoules of energy, and we're counting liters of water, and amount of polypropylene and waste, and we're doing mass balances. So very similar to accounting, where our balance sheet is our mass balance. And like I said, it was something that I never thought that that's where I would end up, but it's really where I naturally was gravitating towards, and where I felt the most comfortable over time. And took me a few years to admit that, hey, like I really do like the technical side of things. And I started finding myself using Excel for everything. I would organize all of my thoughts in Excel. Started building things in VBA, and sort of got into the programming side of things. And once I realized that was not only something that I was good at, but also a viable career path, I really leaned into it. And it really gave me an opportunity, especially moving into the software. And we had a consulting arm that I worked with a lot. It gave me an opportunity to work with just so many different kinds of businesses and so many different manufacturing stages. And, one day I would be building, feed formulations for dairy cows in the US. And the next day I would be looking at, rubber production for footwear uppers and footwear beds. And so it really gave me an opportunity to work on a lot of different things. And, there was never a boring day, and a lot of detective work. I felt like a data detective, and we got to string together all kinds of interesting data sets using Excel. So it was just a fun way. I really enjoyed getting to just build things from the ground up. Most of my projects started with a blank Excel sheet and evolved over months or years into a product that was valuable for our customers. So it's very satisfying work. Felt like we're doing good in the world, and just got to learn about so many different supply chains, so many different places in the world. Got to connect with people all over the world. There was some government work involved. So I was at a fairly young age in my career, got a chance to work with the European Union and the Joint Research Committee, the JRC. So traveling to Brussels a lot, traveling to Washington a lot, and developing standards. So as a young professional coming into the world, you couldn't really ask for a better opportunity to get exposed. And I was given the opportunity by a few people in my career that were great mentors to me and trusted me, and really let me forge my own path and make my own mistakes. So it was a whirlwind few years doing that, and really enjoyed it. And like I said, it really solidified my love of the quantitative side of things, and let me really see the power of being able to calculate things and being able to get down to the numbers. And I think the second part of that was then learning how to talk about the numbers, learning how to run teams that were responsible for producing accurate numbers, and how to express technical details and keep people interested, how to present your work, how to sell your work. It's something I wish I had spent more time as a young man, was learning more about marketing and sales. Engaging more with some of the communities that I was around. I was so focused on the technical side of things that it wasn't until a little bit later in my career that I realized, like, hey, I've got to be able to sell these things, and I've got to be able to talk about these things. So it was a good technical evolution, but I always tried to stay in the technical side of things. I was always interested in the numbers, and I always wanted to be close to the data.
Well, if anybody thinks that, going into accounting or finance is a boring world, I mean, we've just heard some really diverse stories in terms of staff. I mean, obviously, the other argument's like, oh, study biology, what are you going to do with that? Apparently, you can do some really interesting shit. So, this is, fascinating. I mean, I know that these things exist and that people do it, right? Because being in the ag space as well, they talk about, how much water it takes to produce a bottle of wine, or which, water it takes for cow. Like, I know these things need to be done, but never really thought about it's people doing it. Like, there's
Yeah,
people involved in this process. Like, you
totally.
just assumed it's some big ass robot that just got things done, right?
Totally.
But obviously there has to be people inputting running data and analyzing it,
Absolutely.
asking
Absolutely.
questions,
Yep.
just
Absolutely.
absolutely fascinating that this
Yep.
world exists to start.
Well, absolutely. And, still to this day, my mom still wants me to send her a short text to say what it is that I actually do so she can explain it to her friends. It's you're certainly not the only one who's says, yeah, wow, I've never thought about that side of the thing, but it's starting to be more and more prevalent. You're seeing more and more people doing this type of work. And, I started in 2010 was the first year that I started working in that research center, and to say things have evolved from there would be an understatement. I went on, worked at the University of Arkansas for a number of years, went on to work for a small software company based out of the Netherlands, and eventually ended up with a company. They're now called Worldly. But at the time they were called HIG. They were based in the apparel space, and they have a big data gathering and analytics platform that's focused on apparel manufacturers. So apparel manufacturing, that means you're touching cotton, you're touching leather, you're touching all the plastics manufacturing, you're touching the steel manufacturing, and of course energy and transportation and waste treatment are all just integral parts of that. Can be very complicated supply chains. So it's a whole world under the surface, and you get to meet people that are sitting in these nodes and just have this domain expertise about, hey, you want to go out and be able to buy mushroom based leather. Well, here are going to be your supply constraints. Here's how much supply is available. Here's what you need to be worried about with your quality side of things. Here's what the production looked like. So you're just constantly surrounded by these domain experts, and your job becomes, how do I learn how to ask the right questions to get the data that I need out of this? Because I've got to make it fit in this whole big long supply chain. It's got to all be organized in the right way. So yeah, I mean, definitely, it was never dull. It was always very exciting, and I never really felt like I was at work when I was digging into those numbers. So it's anybody that's interested in that side of things, I would highly recommend digging into it. It's a fascinating line of work.
I'm going to just move on to my next set of thoughts because I've got too many questions. I will get hyperfixated and we'll get stuck on it. Absolutely a fascinating just area. And I'm going to go do some extra research on this stuff afterwards.
Happy to talk about it as much as you would like. So just let me know.
Yeah, but I do want to get to what, the fun things that you're building
Yep.
right now,
Yes.
which obviously came from your parallel career
Mm-hmm.
to, this this amazing third planet that we're just been talking about. But you got into the world of real estate investments.
Right.
So
Yep.
so talk me through that investment
Sure.
group that you're a part of.
Yeah. So, my first job as a kid was sweeping floors on a construction site. My dad was a commercial contractor. He started his own business when he was fresh out of college. So was always very focused on making sure that we were working for a living. And so I was sweeping floors, and my lifelong dream as a young kid, preteen and early teens, was to be a carpenter. I saw these guys on the job sites that were just so incredibly capable and could do so many incredible things. And I was working summers, so I'd get to see phases of these jobs. So I just was always around real estate and construction, and that really kind of fit into my interest in building things. So I graduated from grad school in 2010, which was a fairly rough time to be going into the job market. Was lucky enough to get employed with the university, and that's when the financial crisis was happening, and lots of banks were taking property back from developers that had overbuilt. Had an opportunity to buy. We bought 3 rent houses from a bank. A partner and I, a guy, looking back, who I really didn't know very well at the time, and we saw an opportunity. We were both young. I think we were both single at the time, and decided to try this rent house thing out, and bought these rent houses. And, I can still remember, exactly what our note payment was for these rent houses. And we were doing everything there is to do on those things. And we told ourselves, hey, if we can do 1 or 2 of these a year for the next 10 years, we'll build ourselves a nice base of wealth. Fast forward from there, a couple years later, we had we ended up buying an undeveloped subdivision, and we started building houses ourselves. We started building houses for sale, learning about financing, he was the sales side. I kind of naturally went through on the deal mechanics and the financing side of things. And that's when I first started I started building financial models and building accounting tools. And in fact, the very first version of the software that I'm working on now was something I built for myself internally. I was still managing a full-time job and trying to do things on the side. And looking back on it, I was probably a little bit too much in the details. I probably would have been served better to hire some people to do this for me, but I just didn't understand that at the time, and built the first version of what is now my company, Kestrel. I built it in Microsoft Access with an Excel front end. And we gradually moved over into Tableau as the front end. And pretty much every time I'd have a problem or we'd have something new or we'd try to reduce more and more of our costs, we'd add a new feature to it, and I'd break it and I'd start over. And it was really just the only way I knew how to do things was to just start with a blank sheet. So that's how I got involved in real accounting and understanding that from the owner point of view. We sold our first rent houses, made a profit, and then I learned about taxes and tax planning and tax management. And I'll never forget having to go borrow money to pay my capital gains taxes for those first houses, because we just didn't know, just didn't
right?
plan. And you kind of realize, like, hey, the first part of the game is finding the profitable investments and learning how to put the actual cash in the bank. And then the second part is how do you keep as much of that? How do you develop a tax strategy where you're what's going on, you have a general long-term plan, and you can sort of fold that into your future investments. I did a pretty poor job of it, admittedly, in the beginning. But we started exploring things. We did a 1031 exchange. We bought some raw land. We built a commercial center, a neighborhood services center, doing that. So we did some 1031s, did some cost segregation studies, and just sort of opened up this whole world of, hey, if you're good at data in the environmental world, you can be good at data in the financial and accounting side. And if you can arm yourself with that, you have a lot of opportunity, and you can use that to evaluate opportunities, and you can use that to put yourself in a position to take advantage of those opportunities. So it was, I think a lot of people are surprised by that leap. But at the time, I mean, it didn't really matter if it was kilowatt hours of electricity or dollars that were flowing into our next deal. It kind of was all money or all numbers, and we were, was able to transfer those skills. And again, not something I set out to do, but was a natural place for me. Continued to give me that opportunity to work on a lot of different diverse roles. And just been a kind of a lifelong pursuit of learning how to be good with the numbers and learning how to start with something blank and build a financial perspective and a numbers-based perspective on things.
So tell me, where does the courage come from or the confidence come from to just take these wild swings? Like your whole career, your whole story is just, I feel like you're like a modern baseball player. It's either a home run or strike out. Like it's just like big swing after big swing.
I think one of the things that I learned early on was, you can be really prepared. You can look at opportunities. You can, I love to read. I consume a lot of financial information. So you read about all these people that have been successful and what they've done. And I think it just came to a point where it was, all right, there's one part of it is identifying the opportunity. And the second part is being ready to jump on those opportunities when they present themselves. I have to say that my dad was a huge influence on me. He was a pretty skeptical guy, looked at a lot of deals very skeptically, and built his contracting business from the ground up, and that was required a lot of discipline. So he was my deal filter. If I could convince him that it was a good investment and he thought it was, then I had enough confidence to dive into it. I took a lot of risks. I signed a lot of personal guarantees. I signed a lot of things. We felt like we had good opportunities, and really started before I had a lot of didn't have kids relying on me. And had a pretty stable job, and was just kind of felt natural. So I think, looking back on it now, I took a lot of risk, and it was calculated risk. It was good opportunity. I was fortunate that my early ones worked out, and I didn't have any losers until a little bit later in my career. So built a good foundation, and that's just kind of all I knew was that ability. I started working remotely about 15 years ago. So kind of left to your own devices and having to build that discipline. It was very evident that I wasn't going to make it in the consulting world and in my day job and in my real estate pursuits if I wasn't ready to roll my sleeves up and dive in. A little bit of naivete and then a little bit of momentum, and it's just kind of all I've ever known how to do.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Sometimes I just don't know any better. So why did you make the decision? I don't know. I just did. Sometimes it just works out. But I think two things that I really liked about what you just explained. One is, the answers are in the data, right? And I feel like, especially as an accountant that deals with business owners a lot of the time, like I can, bring the spoon over, drop the data down their throats. But if they're not willing to like consume it, understand it, know what it means, and then make decisions based on the data,
Absolutely.
and you can bring in a little bit of gut, right? Like there's a little bit of, creativity that has to come into
Absolutely.
decision making, but the data gives you the answers. I mean,
Absolutely.
you're making those decisions on deals because the numbers based on the projections and the historical information says it should work.
Absolutely.
Now, again, we're not going to push off hard work still how to come with it. But why
Absolutely.
do you think there's such this big disconnect with the general business owner that they have the data to make the decisions, but they're just not making the decisions based on the data?
I think one of the things that I see a lot. So I spent a few years in just my consulting business building dashboards for people, and I think what I've learned over and over in my career is less is more. And one of the most elegant things and most important things that you can do as a person that's responsible for data is make difficult things seem simple and seem clear, and that interpretation of the data is so important. And I always laugh, you people all the time, especially in the US, will say, "Oh, I'm throw their hands up. I'm not good with math. I'm not a data person." And you wouldn't say that about reading or understanding English or anything like that. So it's kind of this socially acceptable thing to say, I'm not a data person. So I think there's a little bit of social permission to just kind of say, I've run by the gut, or, this is the way we've always done things. And so I think people look at data as something that's hard and fast numbers that, kind of is this magical pursuit in the background. And I think really the interpretation of the data, understanding assumptions underlying data, I think is also given me a lot of confidence, especially in the environmental world. We can gather data for months or even years, and if we really boil down to it, there are a few key pieces of data that are, singular pieces of data that are assumptions or the way we've built our model that just have these huge influences on the outcome of some of those studies. So just understanding the data systems, I think. And, again, I think it goes back to being disciplined in how you are defining your problem, using the data to try to support that thesis, and then being ready to address those opportunities as they come up. And I think that's what it really means to be a data-driven investor and a data-driven person. Is it's not that it's just going to give you a complete layup every time, but you've got to be able to get over the hump of, all right, here, this fits our box. This is what we understand. We've got to be able to execute now. And that's been a huge piece of it. Surrounding myself with people that I believed in, that had proven themselves to me, that brought a lot to the table, and vice versa. People that trusted me and kind of let me grow and let me do the things that I'm good at. Partnerships have been a huge part of my career. I've been an independent consultant, but not very independent, right? I mean, I've surrounded myself with other professionals that not only that have hired me, but that I've hired either as contractors or the professionals that surround me in my real estate career. You've got to bring the right people in. You've got to trust them, and you've got to be really ready to execute on your thesis. And all of those things kind of have to be dealt with purposefully. And so it's taking it seriously and making sure that you're ready to execute, I think, have been the most important things for me in my career.
Yeah, I love that the addition of the second part because I was going to touch on that because you brought up, using your dad as a sounding board. And I think everybody's got to realize that, this solopreneur like type of slogan that people love to give them, it's a little fake, right? Like
Absolutely.
they've all got support structures in place. For you, it's your dad
Absolutely.
bouncing that off, right? It's having those people that you can talk about when you have to make those tough decisions. For a lot of people, it's
Absolutely.
their CPA helping with their taxes. It's their attorney that's drafting the contracts. It's that life coach that's helping them get through the demons they have in their life.
Absolutely.
To be successful, you need a team and you
Absolutely.
need to figure out what that team looks like. And generally it relates to a couple of really close people that, hey, I think this is where I'm at. What do you think? Or this is
Absolutely.
what I came back to. Do you agree? Having those
Mhm.
people you can trust and soundboard, I believe makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you agree with that concept.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be anywhere today without the support of the people around me. And I've got very fortunate early on with some of the people that I chose to partner with. Two of whom are still very close partners of mine that, we've been working together for nearly 20 years. It's been great relationships. And so leaning on making sure you surround yourself with the right kind of people that you trust, and then listening to them. I think that's another thing is I've certainly, I try to be more disciplined about it. I'm definitely not going to say I'm great at it. And that's, staying in my lane and understanding what I'm good at and trying to focus on that. I think there's a certain amount of diligence you can do. There's a certain amount of planning that you can do, but especially as a solopreneur like that, you're betting on the people that you surround yourself with. And that's really going to be your action. That's going to be your major leverage is who you surround yourself with. I'm not going to be a banker. I'm not going to be a lawyer. I'm not going to have my insurance. I'm not going to be running most of my construction jobs. You have to find people that you can surround yourself with that you trust, that you can be honest with, that are going to be honest with you. And you've got to be able to build things off of them. And I think it's especially challenging, when you're running a one-person shop. Your network becomes your lifeline. And so I think it's very important to surround yourself with the right kind of people and to select them carefully. That's really the only thing that you can do. Nobody really knows what the future is going to bring, and a great resume may or may not translate into success in whatever you're doing. But making sure that you're purposely choosing those people is really, I think, the most important thing you could do as a solo entrepreneur.
Love it. So many great lessons in those last few minutes there. I really appreciate that. But I want to get into this next part. You've gone from building homes to building software, right? Tell me about this software tool that you're building.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, maybe a little bit naively when I first started, opened up QuickBooks for the first time and just kind of said, hey, this seems like a little bit more than I'm ready for. I really just need a sheet that tells me who has paid rent and did I have enough money after all of our expenses to pay my bank note. And oh my gosh, this bank note is going to be, we got a commercial loan, so it's gonna be over in 3 years. What are we going to do at the end of that? So I addressed that problem in the only way that I knew how. And I opened up an Excel spreadsheet and I started saying, okay, I need to do this every month. And here's where the data is. And so this is how we need to build it. And it helps me learn. It helped me learn the system a lot, sort of building it from the ground up. I literally, I bet I still have it over here somewhere, the Dummy's Guide to Accounting, Dummy's Guide to Real Estate Accounting that I pulled up. So built that and, I bought a tool called, let's see what it's called, Spreadsheet Converter. And it took Excel sheets and turned it into HTML so I could drop it onto a website. And it was kind of my test bed for playing with new technologies. Started getting into data visualization tools like Tableau, and this real estate accounting side of things was just this perfect opportunity to learn while doing. So built that, and we grew fairly quickly to a spot where it was too much for us to manage on our own. I tell people all the time, one of the best decisions I ever made as a real estate investor was to hand everything off to a professional property manager. I complained about the 5% commercial, 10% residential for a little bit. I am currently paying one of my managers 12% because she is an absolute rock star, and I would probably pay her more if she asked me because she is excellent at her job. She does things that I could not do. And there's just no doubt in my mind that it's more profitable for me to pay her to run my businesses. And so I've got properties I've got 4 property managers across 3 different states. Absolutely could not do it without them. So that was a pretty big shift in my management, my day-to-day management as a real estate investor, moving from answering tenant phone calls and making sure that the lawns got mowed and all of that stuff to managing the managers and not having the bank account open every day, not knowing every single detail about every single thing that was happening with every one of my leases. So it admittedly took me a few years to shift into that management style. And one of the fun things was as we grew and as we had new problems, our tooling and our back end stack and tech stack really evolved with us. So how we pulled things together, what we cared about, the numbers we looked at the end of the day, we went from sort of shooting from the hip, we just got to make sure we have enough money at the end of the month to pay the bank note, to, hey, we need to be building budgets. We need to know what sort of cash outlays we're going to be responsible for. Started getting into commercial and triple net investing and learned the hard way that, yeah, they do pay your property taxes and insurance, but they reimburse you. So you better have that cash ready on the front end. And so it evolved to really fit how we were managing our own portfolio and how I was wanting to manage all of that. Started on QuickBooks a number of times and just wasn't very good at keeping up with it. Couldn't reconcile it very easily and would get lost, trying to become a QuickBooks expert. So
Yeah.
did that for a while. And about a year ago was kind of between real estate projects, and I've been working a lot in various software projects, and just decided, hey, I'm going to give this thing a go. It was right when all of the all of the AI tools for the front end development came out, and it was, I would be remiss to say that I didn't get completely sucked in by all of those AI tools, and to be able to get ideas out of your head and into a polished looking front end and visualization. Those are things that I would work for months on and have, teams and teams of designers going through Figma. And I would be a part of a team that helped build all of that to move to that basically being something that you could see instantly on your screen just by being able to describe your problem. I mean, hook, line, and sinker. Like I was hooked on doing that. So that's when I sort of ended up in the place of like, hey, this could be a real tool, and I wonder if I could sell this to other people that I know have this problem. I knew that other people were in my same position. So started off just kind of talking to people in my network, and it became pretty clear that there was a demand for it. And, we were paying a pretty significant amount of money every year for bookkeeping services and multiple QuickBooks services, and still feeling in the dark. I think that was one of the biggest issues with all of it was our year end every year was kind of just dumping documents onto our CPAs. And, I'd look through management reports, I inevitably get questions. Hey, what was this expense from January 18 months ago? And you're just kind of like, oh, let me go dig back into it. So visibility was a big piece of what I wanted to build into my tool. I wanted one spot every morning would drop on, and instead of logging into the 5 different banks that I've got loans from, I got checking accounts in, I could log into one place. I could see everything. And then I knew that at the end of the year, I would need to send, an income statement, a balance sheet, a trial balance, and a general ledger over to my accountant. So I said, could I build that? It doesn't seem too terribly hard. So built the data model behind how I thought that could work. Realized that I was not going to be able to just build that with AI tools. So I went back and hired a few of the engineers that I had worked with before, built a platform. And then I realized I was going to have to market it, which is something I had never done before. And so quite a humbling move into trying to build a marketing team. Hired a really great independent marketer who is, to this day, is helping me build out the marketing infrastructure. So yeah, got it. Started using it for just my own things, and just kind of one thing led to another. And next thing I know, I'd started posting on Twitter X for the first time, and I was told I was need to be building in public and showing the good and the bad. So after I got over my embarrassment of posting online, I still struggle with that. Just started going for it, and it's been great. We're actually, tomorrow is going to be our first internal beta release for our current investors and for our current platform. So yeah, super excited about it. And, it's comforting to know that, if nothing else works, I know there's at least one very satisfied customer, and that's me. So we're handling all of our simple LLCs, handling all the bookkeeping for that. And, now I'm hoping to spend my time with my CPA developing strategy and talking about long-term planning, and, not paying them to clean up my data mess, not paying them to chase me down in the middle of the night. I really want to make everybody's life easier. I want to be more informed. I want my accountant and my CPA to be spending their time helping me plan for the long term and not chasing documents down from me. So yeah, very exciting time. We're thrilled to be able to show this to the world.
Yeah, really great. I mean, sometimes when we try to force a generalist tool to do a specialized task, things fall over pretty quickly. And no better tester than the person who's using it on a day-to-day basis. So just a great way to build, and clearly being successful on the one side, having a tool that will help you be more successful and hopefully plan better so you don't have to take
Yep.
loans out to pay taxes in the future. We don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully.
But just super fascinating,
Yeah.
and I love to hear that AI is sort of what drove you forward in terms of seeing that. I try to play around with AI. I get
Mhm.
deep, and then I have
Mhm.
got to go run it. I've got 40 people I got to look after, so
Yeah.
we go
Yep.
back to dealing with those people. I do want to circle back a little bit because I think there's a
Sure.
really good point that you brought up very early in that conversation about it is hiring people to do things that you maybe can do, but probably not a good for you to be doing. I
Absolutely.
personally know that is a lesson that took me way too long to do. But, once you figure that out as a business owner, you just see everything take off.
Absolutely. And that's, I have to give credit back to my dad. Again, one of his favorite sayings is you got to put down the tool belt. You can't go out and do everything. And he talks about, when he was running his construction business, moving somebody from a superintendent on the job role into a project manager role, or moving into a person manager role. And he said, it's just every single time that first year, they want to be the problem solvers. They don't want because that's what they've done their whole lives. They're the ones that roll their sleeves up and go and get things done. And it's just so important if you want to be able to manage, bigger organizations, bigger projects, you have to be able to give that responsibility to other people, and you have to be able to trust them and give them the space to do their work. It goes back to choosing the right people. You get to a certain point, you don't have any other option. It just becomes too much for you to even begin to take on. And it's something that I certainly still struggle with today. And I think a lot of
Me too.
technical people, certainly in the accounting world, like you've got to be able to resist it. I think it is a money saving thing. And I want to do all of it myself, but especially on the technical side, I want to do it. I'm interested in doing it. And so it does take a lot of discipline to really step back and make sure that you are letting the people that you have surrounded with do their job and do it by themselves. I think micromanaging and being being there for every step of the way is a really hard way to manage people. And I don't have a ton of people that work for me, but the ideal situation, I think, for any entrepreneur is you find the people that are good at what they're doing, and they're supporting you, and you give them the space to do that. And I mean, I don't know any other way to do it, frankly.
Yeah, and I just to sort of circle around this whole issue, right? Like, I think one of the things we got to get away from is that task might take me 30 minutes and it's taking them 60 minutes. And that sounds like a lot of time that's being wasted, but it's not. It's giving you back 30 minutes. And imagine what you can do with those 30 minutes. And for me, that could just
Absolutely.
be getting 30 more minutes of sleep because I haven't slept
Totally.
enough in the last 12 years, right? But it's the same with AI. Like, let's not forget that. Like, one of the things right now, like, you spoke about QuickBooks, they have a tool that reconciles your bank account for you.
Hmm.
It does
Hmm.
take longer than you doing it yourself,
Yeah.
but you don't have to do it yourself.
Right.
So it's
Right.
not, it's time gained, even if the system takes longer. Who gives a, you've got 10 minutes back to go do something else. And maybe that's have a bathroom break. Maybe it's have a cup of coffee. Maybe it's give your kid a hug. It gives you the time back. And that's the important thing is like, what can I do with the time that's being given back? Because I've trusted somebody else or some other tool to do this task that I don't need to be doing anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a really good observation here. It's not just, hey, I've got this busy work that I don't have to do anymore. Now I've got all this other busy work that I know I need to go do from there. I think using that space as some unstructured time. And I think as a solo entrepreneur, recognizing that there's a lot of value in, hey, like I said, I work from home and working from my basement for about 15 years. I got to make sure I get outside every day. And that can be very dangerous. I can find myself, I haven't left my house in 2 days because I've been really busy on a project. So giving your brain a break, giving yourself some time to think and really, internalize whatever problems or thoughts or new pursuits you're working on. That space and that time is very valuable. And, now as I'm, sure you experience with kids, like that's the most valuable resource. And that's a, cliche to say, but it's just more and more true every day. And the more that you can surround yourself with people and processes that help automate things, one, it shows you understand the problem. And if you're not able to say, I've got this issue, it's taking up too much of my time, here's how I'm going to solve it, and here's what I need to put into place to solve it, you don't understand the problem well enough. So it forces you to understand the problem. It forces you to develop those processes. And then what you do with that free time is how you make that difference. It's how you get yourself into new things. It's how you cover more bases than you would have been able to do without bringing those people in. So my day is pretty varied. It goes up and down. There's no telling what I may be doing day to day, which is really great for me. Definitely fits my personality and what I want to do. The only way you can do that is if you have good processes, if you trust those processes, and you have good people surrounding you that you trust to get things done, and that'll hold you accountable. Certainly, there are key people on my team who do a lot of chasing me down and making sure that I am doing what I need to be doing, and finding that balance is really, really important. So I think capturing that time back and what you do with it is really how you are going to grow. And I don't think there's another way to do it.
I love it. Cash, I really appreciated your time.
Absolutely.
As we head into sort of wrapping up here, and I've learned so much today. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I would love to just hear from you. Sort of what are the short-term plans? What are the goals in the near future? What are you working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, I am pretty much 100% focused on our automated bookkeeping tool for real estate investors. It's called Kestrel. KestrelRMS.com. We are rolling it out to our network. I think one of the most fun things is that success looks really different for me as a bootstrap solo entrepreneur, and I've got the freedom to take it slow. I can personally reach out to people in my network. One of the most interesting things about this is the first full tool for software project I've built in an industry that I know very well. And so I built a lot of dashboards for manufacturing companies that make XYZ widget that I don't know the first thing about making. So that makes it helps you develop your skills around asking questions and identifying the problem. But now I am the primary customer for what I'm building. And that's been great. It's been challenging. I have to make sure that I'm not, don't have my blinders on. There are certainly other ways to do things. And so that is my biggest pursuit right now. The world is changing rapidly. That is certainly an understatement. And, I think that there's never been a more exciting time to build things. I think that AI and the development of AI and the dispersion of AI is going to be, it's going to be growth oriented. I think it's going to open up more opportunities than there have ever been. I don't think there's ever been a better opportunity to go out and build something. Certainly things are changing, but I believe this is going to be largely expansive, and there's just no better time to start than now. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm starting this journey down marketing, which I think is just going to become more and more important, and developing that voice and developing real human connections and a network of people that trust you and a network of people that you trust. So that's really where I'm putting my efforts these days, is trying to connect with other people that are building in these spaces and finding and listening to our customers so we can build better tools.
Fantastic. Cash, we love to end Protea Conversations with some rapid fire. I have 5 questions for you.
Let's
Are you
do
ready?
it. Absolutely.
Do you prefer audiobooks or paper books?
I'm going to say paper books. I do listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I find myself zoning out a lot. So paper books.
I'm exactly the opposite. I zone out when I'm reading paper. If you have 20 minutes to exercise, what would that exercise be?
A run with my dog, for sure.
Mountains or ocean?
Man, I'm going to say ocean. That is, I've actually never really lived near an ocean. I spent a lot of time in Colorado. I live in the Ozark Mountains, so I spend a lot of time in the mountains, but I do truly love the ocean. So I might say ocean.
I love it. The mountain people always want to get to the ocean, and the ocean people always want to get to the mountains. What's your favorite piece of technology that makes your life better?
Oh my gosh, my favorite piece of technology? That is a good one. Okay, I'm going to say this. My Apple earbuds, my new AirPods, they are something I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. That's probably my most used piece of technology. I love having them. Going back to your audiobooks, I listen to a ton of podcasts. So for better or worse, it's become my new just constant stream of information. I wear them all day long. So I love those things. And I carry a headlamp around with me everywhere I go. So that's my other piece of comfort technology, old school technology that I always have around me. So those are the 2 things I probably have in my pocket right now.
Somebody in a crawl space and that likes to go hunting. That's
right.
Something that they like.
Crawl space listening to the Protea Conversations pod.
I love it. Final question. You're on death row. What's that final meal?
It would have to be a nice big bowl of ramen.
Love it. Cash, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being on Protea Conversations.
Same, thank you. This has been great.
And with that, we ended another Protea Conversations. Thank you for joining us in this journey of learning and inspiration. Today we've gained insight from our guests and taken another step towards understanding the diverse tapestry of leadership in business and accounting. Remember, each conversation is a step towards the positive transformation of business leaders. We hope our discussion has given you valuable takeaways that apply in your career and life. Don't forget to subscribe to Protea Conversations on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so connect with me on social media channels. I'm most active on LinkedIn and would love you to join the conversation. Join us next time